My name is Claire Navarro. I was 36 years old, and the phone call that cracked my entire world open came on a Tuesday morning so ordinary that I had literally been standing in my kitchen thinking about whether I needed to buy more coffee creamer. That was my mental state. When my phone rang, a woman's voice, professional, careful, the kind of voice that has been trained to deliver bad news without flinching. Ms. Navarro, I'm calling from Blue Ridge Mortgage and Trust regarding the refinance application on 412 Sycamore Ridge Road, your property listed jointly with a Gabriela Navarro. We just need to verify a few co-borrower details before we move to closing. The loan amount is $240,000. I put my coffee mug down, slowly. Ma'am, I said, what property did you just say? Because here is what that woman didn't know. Here is what nobody knew yet, not even my sister, who was probably asleep in her apartment at that exact moment, warm and unbothered, and completely unaware that in about 11 days, the carefully constructed lie she had spent months building was going to come apart, like wet cardboard in a rainstorm. She had forged my name on my father's house, the house he built with his own 2 hands. She had practiced my signature. She had recruited someone to stamp it official. She had filed it with the county. And she had been sitting across from me at Thanksgiving dinner 6 weeks later, laughing at my jokes, asking about my job, telling me she loved me. And I believed every single word. That is the part that still gets me on bad nights. Not the forgery, not the legal nightmare that followed, not even the money. The part that guts me is that I sat across from her and I believed her. Because she was my sister. She had always been my sister. And when you love someone that deep, that long, that completely, you build blind spots around them without even knowing you're laying the foundation. I built mine out of 20 years of showing up for Gabriela no matter what. And she used every single brick. This is the story of what happened when I found out. What I found when I started digging. And the thing buried in my father's paperwork that nobody, not my sister, not her lawyer, not anyone, saw coming. Stay with me, because this story doesn't just end with justice. It ends with something my daddy set in motion, from beyond the grave. And when I tell you he planned for this, I mean he planned for this. My father, Earl Navarro, was not a complicated man. He was a construction foreman in Western North Carolina for 31 years. The kind of man who showed up first on every job site and left last, and never once mentioned either fact, because to him, that was just called showing up. He had rough, scarred hands that could frame a wall or gentle a crying kid with equal steadiness. And he had exactly one personal philosophy that he applied to everything, from concrete to character. Measure twice, cut once, never guess. He built our house on Sycamore Ridge Road over the course of 3 years of weekends and holidays, hauling materials up a mountain road in a beat-up F-150, teaching himself whatever he didn't already know from library books and pure stubbornness. 2 stories, cedar siding and riverstone foundation, a back porch that faces a ridgeline that turns every color of fire when the sun sets. Orange and pink and that deep bruise purple that makes you feel like you're watching something holy. My mama called it his other family. He just called it right. He raised 2 daughters in that house. Me, Claire, the younger one, the serious one, the one who followed him around job sites from the time I could walk, asking 1,000 questions he was always patient enough to answer. And Gabriela, 2 years older, brighter than the sun, with a smile that could talk its way out of a traffic ticket, and a relationship with consequences that was, to put it gently, something she and consequences had agreed to see other people. Dad loved us both like breathing, but he knew us. The way only a father who genuinely pays attention knows his kids. Not the Sunday dinner version, not the holiday version, but the real version. The 2 a.m. version. The version under pressure, when money gets tight and old resentments warm up and people show you who they actually are. He planned accordingly. I was 9 years old the first time he handed me his brass level. Worn smooth from 30 years of use, his initials scratched into the side, and said the thing he would say to me 100 more times before he died. "Baby girl! You want to know if something's true? You don't guess. You don't hope. You measure." I took that into a 12-year career as an insurance fraud investigator. I took it into every relationship, every major decision, every hard conversation I ever had to have. I took it into everything, except my own sister. That was the one place I put the level down, and that right there, that single blind spot I had carried for 20 years out of pure unconditional love, is exactly where Gabriella put the crowbar. Let me tell you about my sister, because if you're going to understand how this happened, you have to understand her first. Not the villain version, the real version. Because she wasn't a villain. She was something harder to reckon with than that. Gabriella Navarro was genuinely one of the most magnetic people I have ever known in my entire life. She walked into rooms and things shifted. People leaned toward her. Strangers told her things within 20 minutes they'd never told their therapists. She had this laugh, this big, unself-conscious, totally committed laugh that made you feel like you had done something genuinely brilliant just by making her smile. She was also, by the time she turned 37, in a state of slow-motion, beautiful wreckage that had been building for a decade. 3 businesses, a clothing boutique that lasted 2 years, a wellness studio she sold at a loss, and a curated travel experience company that collapsed 8 months in when the investors got cold feet. 2 divorces, both from men who started out completely dazzled and ended up completely defeated. One bankruptcy she described to our extended family as a strategic pivot. And she delivered it with such breezy confidence that our Aunt Rosa actually nodded along like she'd said something smart. And through every single bit of it, I was there. Every time, without exception, without hesitation, wearing money when things got desperate, co-signing things I had quiet reservations about, but signed anyway because she was my sister, and she needed me, being the steady one, the reliable one, the one who never fell apart, the one everybody knew would handle it. Claire will be fine. Claire doesn't need anything. Claire always handles it. That was the unspoken contract between me and my family, and I had written every single word of it myself. Over 20 years of being aggressively, almost proudly self-sufficient. I never asked for help. I never showed when I was struggling, so I carried everything alone and called it strength. And the people around me took that as permission to stop protecting me. Then Gabriella called me on a Sunday evening. And from the first word, I could hear she'd been working herself up to it for a while. She needed money. $40,000. A restaurant lease in Asheville. Investors almost finalized. Just a bridge loan. A few months, maybe 6. She would sign whatever I wanted. And something in me, some small quiet alarm that 12 years of fraud investigation had installed, went off when she said, "The investors are almost finalized." I had heard that sentence before, from strangers, from people who needed you focused on the future so you wouldn't look too hard at the present. I almost asked questions. Then I heard her start to cry. Just a little. That specific Gabriella cry, not performed, genuinely scared, genuinely ashamed. And 20 years of being a safe place kicked in so hard and so fast. I didn't even feel it happen. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I'll wire it Monday." I wired $40,000 on a Monday morning and told her to call me when she surfaced. She called twice over the next 4 months. Warm, breezy calls. The restaurant was coming along. Investors close to finalizing. She'd get me a check by Christmas. Christmas came. No check. I texted. I got back a fire emoji and, "Soon, things are insane, RN! Love you!" I let it slide. I told myself she was embarrassed. I told myself she'd come through. I told myself a whole lot of things. That turned out to be wrong. The Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was standing in my kitchen thinking about coffee creamer when the mortgage officer called. $240,000. Refinance application. My name as co-borrower. My father's house as collateral. "Please don't move forward with that application," I said, very, very carefully. "Not a single step. I'll call you back within the hour." I hung up and I sat down on my kitchen floor. Not the couch, not a chair, the floor. With my back against the cabinet and my father's brass measuring tape in my hand, I keep it on the counter like other people keep a lucky charm. Pressing the worn metal against my palm, while the room did something strange and swimmy around me. 4 minutes, maybe 5, then the part of me my father built took over. The steady part, the measuring twice part, the you don't guess, you don't hope, you measure part. I got up, I got in my car, and I drove to the county register of deeds. Before I called anyone, before I called Gabriella, before I called a lawyer, before I called my best friend or my aunt or God or anybody else, because I needed to see the paper first. I needed to know the full shape of it. It was all there. A quitclaim deed filed 6 weeks prior. It transferred my half of the Sycamore Ridge property to Gabriella Navarro as sole owner. The signature on the grantor line read, "Claire M. Navarro," in handwriting that was close to mine. Very close, but wrong. I have signed my name on 12 years of insurance claims documents. Thousands of them. And your signature leaves in your muscle memory like your own face in the mirror. The lowercase a in my signature closes at the bottom with a slight leftward curl. This one finished flat. The tail on my R drifts left when I write fast. Always, consistently, for as long as I can remember. This one went straight. She had practiced. Whoever signed this had sat down with samples of my handwriting and practiced until they could produce something convincing to a casual eye. But not to mine. I photographed the deed. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and pulled up 6 weeks of bank records on my phone. And that's when I found the second thing. The rental income from a storage unit my father had left attached to the property. Modest, just a few hundred a month, had been quietly redirected 6 weeks ago to an account I had no knowledge of. She hadn't just forged a deed on a bad day. She had been planning this systematically over months, rerouting income streams, building documentation, setting up the mortgage application, laying the groundwork piece by piece, while texting me heart emojis and asking how my week was going, and the $40,000 I had wired her. I sat in that parking lot, and I understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water poured directly into my chest, what that money had actually been. It had been a test. She had been checking whether I was paying attention. I wasn't. Not then. I was paying attention now. I want to pause here because I can feel some of you, right now, feeling something in your chest that isn't just about me and Gabriella. Maybe you're the dependable one in your family, the one everybody calls, the one who shows up, who handles it, who never asks for anything back, because you've been so self-sufficient for so long that people have stopped thinking of you as someone who might need protecting. And maybe you have someone in your life, someone you love fiercely and completely, who has been quietly, carefully taking advantage of exactly that. I see you. I know that specific kind of hurt. The kind that doesn't just break your heart, but makes you question your own judgment in a way that is genuinely hard to come back from. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you next, what I found when I kept digging, I was not prepared for it, and neither were they. I called Marcus Webb that afternoon, a property litigation attorney in Asheville. Quiet man, mid-50s, the kind of attorney who has heard every flavor of family catastrophe and is surprised by none of it. I laid out everything in his conference room. 25 minutes, documents on the table, voice flat and steady. Because if I let it become anything else, I wasn't going to get through it. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he picked up the quitclaim deed and looked at it the way a doctor looks at a scan when they're confirming something they already suspected. Felony forgery, he said. Residential real property. And the mortgage application on top of it pushes into federal territory. I know. He set the deed down and looked at me over his glasses. There's something you need to know about your father's estate documents, Claire. Something I found when I went back through them. I went very still. Your father didn't just leave you the house in a will. Webb said slowly. 3 years before he died, while he was still healthy, while everything was still normal, he sat down with Judge Holloway and restructured the estate plan, quietly, without telling either of you. He placed it in a protective property trust, with a fraud clause. Plain language, no ambiguity. Any attempt to transfer, encumber, or extract equity from the property through fraudulent means, forged signatures, false documentation, misrepresentation of ownership, would trigger an automatic legal challenge, freezing all transactions immediately. He asked Holloway specifically about forgery scenarios, Webb told me. He wanted to know what happened to a property transaction if a signature was fraudulent. Holloway said he'd never had a client ask so specifically. I couldn't speak for a moment. The trustee, Webb said carefully, is you. Your father made you the trustee without telling you. I thought about Earl Navarro on the back porch, his rough hand steady on his coffee mug, the way he looked at Gabriella sometimes with that expression I could never quite name. Not disappointment exactly, but something watchful, something a little sad. He had seen something I hadn't let myself see, and instead of saying it out loud, instead of driving a wedge between his daughters or forcing a confrontation nobody would win, he had just quietly, meticulously, built a wall around the thing he loved most. He had trusted the paperwork to say what he couldn't. Just like he'd always trusted the level to tell the truth when people wouldn't. I did not call Gabriella for 13 days. I know that shocks people. But here's what 12 years of fraud investigation teaches you. You do not show your hand until the hand is complete. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I waited, I built, I documented, and when Gabriella texted me on day 9 asking if I wanted to do a sister weekend soon, I texted back a heart emoji and told her I'd love that. I sent my sister a heart emoji while I was building a fraud case against her. That is a sentence I never thought I would say about my own life. On day 13, when I had everything, every document, every expert report, every verified piece of evidence in a folder that told one clean, airtight, devastating story, I called Gabriella and invited her home to Sycamore Ridge for the weekend. "Come home," I said. "I've been thinking about Dad. I want to be with my sister." She said yes, without a second's hesitation, which told me she still thought she was ahead of it. She arrived Friday evening, and she stood on the porch in the October dusk, looking like a movie star who had been crying in the trailer for an hour before the scene. Beautiful and tired and slightly brittle around the edges. The way Gabriella always looked when a story was starting to come apart. She hugged me the second she got through the door. Long and hard and real. The way she used to hug me when we were kids. When the world got too big and I was the person she ran to. I held on, because whatever the next 2 hours were going to do to us, she was still the girl who climbed into my bed during thunderstorms. She was still the person I had grown up alongside and loved fiercely and completely since before I had words for what a sister was. We ate dinner. Chicken and biscuits. Mama's recipe. We talked about Dad. We laughed until we were both crying. And then I poured 2 glasses of wine, sat across from her on the back porch, and put the folder on the table between us. She looked at it, then at me. "Claire, just look at it first," I said. "Please, just look." I laid it out piece by piece, quietly. The quitclaim deed with my forged signature. The forensic report. 17 letter form discrepancies. Not my signature. Tess Drover's defective notary entry. The missing thumbprint. My hotel confirmation. My conference badge scan at 8:47 in the morning. The sign-in sheet with my name. And the timestamp from the panel I'd presented in front of 40 people. 3 hours away, while my signature was supposedly being notarized. Gabriella didn't say a word. She looked at each page I set down and her face moved through 3 or 4 versions of itself. The first one still reaching for a pivot, the second one calculating, and then the third one, the one that came last and stayed longest. Just her. No performance, no angle, just my sister, standing in the wreckage of what she'd done, too tired to pretend anymore. "How long have you known?" she asked. Her voice was different, smaller. 13 days. "And you didn't say anything." "I needed the whole picture first." She set her wine glass down, put both hands flat on the porch railing, and looked out at the dark ridge. And then she started to cry. Not the pretty kind, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and real, and has no performance in it at all. "I told myself you didn't need it," she said, not looking at me. "You have your career, your condo, your whole life figured out. I told myself you'd never even have to know. I was going to pay the mortgage, stabilize the restaurant, and you'd never see a single document." "Gabriella, I know." She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. "I know, Claire. You forged my signature on Daddy's house. She flinched so hard, it was almost physical. You sat down and you practiced my handwriting until you could fake it. You brought Tess into it, your best friend, and you fed her enough of a story to get her to put her official seal on a lie. And then you filed it with the county and applied for $250,000 against our father's house while texting me. I know! It came out ragged and broken. I know what I did, Claire. I know exactly what I did. I was so far under, and I couldn't see any other way out. And I kept telling myself I'd fix it before it ever touched you. But it did touch me, I said. My voice stayed steady, because one of us had to. It touched me the morning a mortgage officer called me about a loan I never agreed to, on a house I half own. That's when it touched me. She put her face in her hands. We sat like that for a while. The tree frogs, the dark ridge, the October night that smelled like cedar and turning leaves, and the exact complicated grief of loving someone you can no longer fully trust. There's something else you need to know, I said eventually. Something about Daddy's estate documents. Something he built in that none of us knew existed. She looked up, and I told her about the trust, about the fraud clause, about Earl Navarro sitting in Judge Holloway's office 3 years before his death, asking specifically about forgery scenarios and how to protect against them. Gabriella went completely still. He knew, she said, very quiet. Not a question. I think he knew it was possible, I said. I think he loved you too much to say it. So he just fixed it. The way he always fixed things, with his hands and a plan and the right paperwork. She put her head down on the porch railing, and cried in a way that had nothing in it anymore. No strategy, no spin, no angle, just the full weight of what she'd done and what it had cost, and what our father had known about her, that she'd spent her whole life hoping nobody could see. I didn't touch her. I wanted to. I didn't. I just sat with her in the dark while the ridge stood black and enormous against the stars the way it always has, and let it be what it was. The worst night of both our lives, and the most honest conversation we had ever had. Marcus Webb filed the quiet title action the following Monday morning at 9 a.m. 8 weeks later, 8 weeks of documentation, expert testimony, forensic analysis, and one deeply uncomfortable deposition in which Tess Drover admitted under oath that she had knowingly certified a signature she knew was not mine. A judge signed the order. The quitclaim deed was void, null from the moment it was signed, legally speaking, as if it had never existed. The Sycamore Ridge property was confirmed as jointly owned by both daughters per Earl Navarro's will. Every mortgage application, every lien attempt, every financial encumbrance stacked on top of that forged deed. Nullified, simultaneously. The fraud clause in Dad's trust triggered exactly as he designed it to. All attempted transactions frozen, all fraudulent documentation flagged for law enforcement. Blue Ridge Mortgage referred the matter to their fraud unit. The FBI received a referral shortly after, because submitting fraudulent documentation on a federally regulated mortgage application is a federal crime, and the people who investigate those don't ask twice. Tess Drover's notary commission was suspended. She entered a cooperation agreement. Her 15-year friendship with Gabriella was over. Had been over, I think, from the moment Tess realized that Gabriella had been willing to take her down too. Gabriella's attorney negotiated for almost 3 months. In the end, she pleaded guilty. 1 count of felony forgery, full restitution, the $40,000 plus legal costs, 3 years probation, community service, and a public record that will follow her through every background check, every loan application, every professional license request, for the foreseeable future. She called me the night before her sentencing. I almost didn't pick up. I stood there holding my phone, watching her name on the screen, for 4 full rings. I picked up on the 5th. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was not easy. It was not comfortable. There were long stretches of silence neither of us tried to fill, but it was honest. More honest than we'd been with each other in years, maybe ever. She said she was sorry. Not the rehearsed kind. Not the kind designed to get something. Just the plain, exhausted, I have run out of anything else to say kind. I told her I believed her. I told her I loved her. I told her that those 2 things could both be true at the same time, and that I didn't know yet what it looked like for us going forward, but that I wasn't going to pretend she didn't exist. And I wasn't going to pretend what she did didn't happen. She cried. I cried. We hung up. I don't know what we are now. I don't think there's a word for it yet. We are 2 people who love each other and broke something irreplaceable and are in the middle of figuring out whether broken things can be rebuilt into something new or just into something different. I'm somewhere in the middle of that. I'll let you know when I get to the other side. I moved into Sycamore Ridge that November. I had been renting since I left for college at 18, carrying around a quiet homelessness I had rebranded as independence and told myself was a personality trait. It wasn't. It was just not having claimed the thing that was already mine. Not letting myself want it too openly, in case wanting it meant losing it. I claimed it. I refinished the back porch floor myself over a long November weekend with Dad's belt sander and a playlist of every song I've ever loved, turned up loud enough to feel in my chest. I fixed the gutter he'd been meaning to get to for 2 years before he died. I repainted the shutters, the specific shade of green my mother had chosen from a hardware store sample card in 1991. The sample card was still in the kitchen drawer. I left it there. The ridge still goes pink and orange, and that deep bruised purple at dusk. I sit on the back porch and watch it most evenings. The cedar smell all around me, the tree frogs in the hollow, the dark coming down over the mountain the way it has my entire life. My father's brass measuring tape hangs on a hook by the back door. The same hook he put there sometime in the 90s. His initials scratched faint into the wall beside it. I touch it every time I leave the house. Every time I come home. Here's what I want to leave you with. The thing I've turned over and over since that night on the porch when I finally understood what my father had done. Earl Navarro was not a man who talked about hard things. He was a man who solved hard things, quietly, carefully, with his hands and his level and his absolute refusal to cut corners on anything that mattered. He loved his daughters, both of them completely without condition, and he also knew them, the real them. And instead of picking sides or drawing lines or forcing a confrontation that would have broken something irreparable, he had just quietly, meticulously built a wall around the thing most worth protecting. He never said a word about it to either of us. He just measured twice, built it right, and trusted that it would hold when it needed to. It held, and standing in that house on a November evening, with the ridgeline going fire outside the window and his measuring tape in my hand, I finally understood something I'd been carrying around my whole life without knowing what it was. Being the steady one isn't a burden. It isn't a limitation. It's not what makes you a target or what makes you easy to overlook. It's a choice made every day to do the work right, measure what matters, and build things that last. My father made that choice every day of his life. And the house on Sycamore Ridge Road, the one he built with his own hands on weekend mornings while his daughters slept, the one he protected with a clause in a trust document he never told anyone about, the one that stood through everything my family threw at it, is still standing, still solid, every corner still square, just like he built it. If this story hits something in you, if you're the reliable one, the one everybody takes for granted, the one people have stopped worrying about because you've never given them reason to, I want you to hear this directly. Being dependable is not the same as being unprotected. Being quiet is not the same as being unaware. And the ones who carry everything without complaining, we know exactly how much everything weighs. Measure twice, y'all, on everything. Drop a comment below and tell me, are you the dependable one in your family? And if this story reminded you of someone you love, send it to them. They need to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.